This week on that wonderful show in which Matt rambles on without a script about a video game that he likes or dislikes or whatever, we're going to talk about a debate on the internet. And yeah, I'm going to wind up talking about a game that I've already talked about, but it's been finals week, so I haven't really had time to play anything else. So we're going to talk about Sekiro again. Because that same debate that crops up every time a new From Software game comes out has reared its ugly head again. And considering that Sekiro is without a doubt the most difficult entry in the Soulsborne franchise universe, it makes perfect sense that the voices this time are considerably louder. Indeed, this week I would like to address the vicious debate around easy modes in From Software games. From Software games are difficult. That's just kind of a thing that exists now. There's a reputation for challenge in these games. Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and now Sekiro being the pristine example of that design philosophy. This game wants you to know how to do its things. If you don't understand the mechanics of your character and how he flows, you will never finish this game. I managed to finally defeat Sword Saint Ishin after, goddamn, 4 hours of grinding, but eventually it all clicks. I don't think it's really a stretch to say this game is kind of almost like Guitar Hero with swords on a certain level. You are pressing the attack, you are deflecting all of that noise. And that whole new system, as well as the game's extremely restrictive nature forcing you into that one style of play, means that Sekiro requires a considerable amount more skill than the previous entries in the series. So it makes sense that this debate would surface, just like it has for every single other From Software game that has come before it. Sekiro is not an easy game, so a lot of people are advocating for easy modes or something similar to Celeste's system, which allows you to change how the game behaves. Now, I want to address both sides of this argument, the people arguing for accessibility and the people arguing for difficulty, because both sides have kind of some valid points to make, and then at the end I will give you my personal opinion on whether or not this should happen. I'm going to leave out a couple of arguments, though. Specifically one on each side. First of all, the entitlement argument. I bought a game, I am entitled to every part of that game, which is kind of a fallacious assumption. And the difficulty argument. These games are clearly hard, so you need to get good. That is also an argument with a lot of holes in it. Those two arguments are some that get thrown around. Hell, one of them has basically been turned into a fucking meme.
You didn't grow. You didn't improve. You took a shortcut and gained nothing.
But both the entitlement argument and the difficulty argument are incredibly subjective and have a lot of holes in them. I want to focus instead on the more concrete arguments of accessibility versus intent. So let's go over these two arguments now. First of all, I'd like to address the argument of accessibility. Accessibility being the ability for your game to be played by more and more people. It having options so that anyone can engage it at their level. Various arguments basically state that accessibility is a universal good. By adding an easy mode option to games, it doesn't impact the normal mode flow of that game. It only serves to bring in new people who might not be able to play it otherwise. And this is a pretty effective argument to make. I mean, player agency and the ability to play a game that you want to play your way is kind of a big deal. Agency in itself is a mechanic. Games like Undertale showed us how it can be used narratively, and other games, almost every game on the planet, uses accessibility options in some way to modify the experience of a game to tailor it better to its player. And giving Sekiro or the other Soulsborne games some sort of easy mode option, or more effectively a Celeste-style dashboard to adjust behavior, wouldn't necessarily impact those who don't choose to use it. Accessibility also makes sense from a commercial perspective, where greater accessibility means that your game has access to larger markets, and those larger markets can therefore bring in new players, and those new players can give you all of their money, which is always nice. Accessibility has some issues, though, and they're actually issues that I've argued in the past. One of the arguments against accessibility are things like balancing. When you're making multiple difficulty levels, especially in a game as tightly balanced as Sekiro, You do need to make multiple balance passes throughout the entire game for each difficulty. You need to tweak it to make sure it's just right on each difficulty. If one of those difficulties is less engaging than the other because it's badly balanced, then what is even the point of having it? And this draws development resources away from the game, or not necessarily away from the game, but into different places. This means that overall, both modes might not be nearly as tightly balanced as they would be with only one difficulty. Another issue that comes up is that this creates stratification in the community. If you've ever wanted to see stratification in a community in action, look at World of Warcraft and the difference between a player in LFR and a player who works their way through heroic raiding. There is almost an entirely different ethos to these kinds of people, and when they interact, it's almost always that the people who raid in heroic are elitist pieces of shit, and the people who raid in LFR are casual baby men. So it's understandable that this might cause some rifts in the community even. And in a series of games that are almost worn like badges of honor to some people, it makes sense that this kind of community pressure would almost certainly exist. The Soulsborne communities are still extremely strong. I'm subscribed to the Bloodborne and Dark Souls subreddits, and they're still active even years and years after their release, while other games like Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and the Nier subreddits have basically devolved into lewd fan art storage spaces. Stratification of such a devoted community might cause a lot more harm than good. But now let's look at the other side of the coin. On the coin of people who believe that this game has an intent, and that intent should be respected. In 2016, Hidetaka Miyazaki, the director of the Soulsborne games and Sekiro, gave an interview to Wired which gave us a little bit of an insight into how he sees these games. In this interview, he stated, "I have no intention to make these games more difficult than other titles on purpose. It's just something required to make this style of game. Ever since Demon's Souls, I've really been pursuing making games that give players a sense of accomplishment by overcoming tremendous odds. We've added new items and weapons over the course of the series, and having a certain level of difficulty adds value to those because they incentivize players to experiment with more character builds and weapon loadouts." In addition, in a further interview he gave in 2018, Miyazaki stated, "We don't want to include difficulty selection because we want to bring everyone to the same level of discussion and the same level of enjoyment." He went on further to say, "So we want everyone to first face that challenge and to overcome it in some way that suits them as a player." What these quotes from Miyazaki establish is a clear intention towards how these games are played. He means them to be difficult as he wants these games to give you a feeling of accomplishments as you're overcoming tremendous odds, and he wants these games to be unified in their difficulty so everyone comes to them at the same level. This is essentially a statement of artistic intent. He has a desire for how these games want to go, and therefore he designs them that way, which is why he doesn't add things like an easy mode or make the games simpler. I'd argue that some of the greatest games of our generation come from a very clear artistic viewpoint. Somebody wants to create something specific, and they have the directorial ability, the team, and the passion to do so, and so they do. Games like Nier Automata, or Automata, or Autotomato, or how the fuck you say that, are clearly influenced by the directorial vision of their creators, in that case Yoko Taro, and the Soulsborne and Sekiro games are no different. In the case of major publishers, we often hear arguments about how studios should have the ability to make the games they want to make, and there's no difference in what's happening here with Hidetaka Miyazaki and the Soulsborne Sekiro games. There are some arguments that could be made against this here, though. Miyazaki states that he wants everybody to come in and have the same level of enjoyment from the game, but some people aren't necessarily having that level of enjoyment out of the game because they're unable to progress due to how hard the game is, so they aren't really enjoying themselves. Another argument is that the artist's viewpoint is not the only viewpoint that should be interpreted as valid when viewing a piece of art. It's okay to impose your own ideas on it, and that viewpoint and perspective is just as valid as the one of the person who created it. I'm not 100% sold by this argument. Personally, I believe that artists' intention to send a message is more important than that, but it is a valid argument to make. I can understand how somebody with a completely different viewpoint from Miyazaki might interpret his games in a completely different way. But I've summed up both sides of this argument in a somewhat neutral way, and I've given you a couple of counter-arguments to each that I think are valid. let's talk about my personal opinions on this argument. Where do I fall here? And I think those of you who've watched me for a long time will know exactly where I fall here. I don't personally believe that every single game is meant to be played by every single gamer. And I do believe that it is valid for a game to be virtually unplayable by some people. First of all, let me point out that I'm not saying this because I believe in gatekeeping. I don't think that anybody should be barred from playing any kind of video game. I honestly believe that everybody should be able to experience this medium, as more people who come into it create new, diverse perspectives that will inevitably give us even more interesting games. What I do believe is that every single tool available to a developer to make a game which suits their vision should be on the table. And difficulty is just another tool. Just like graphics, music, and mechanics. Difficulty is a way for a developer to shape experiences with their game. Not all games use all of these tools in the same way. Some games have deeply stripped down graphics. Look at a game like Minute. Minute has a very simplistic graphical style. It tears away most of its visuals in order to create a very specific feeling. Who's to say the same thing can't be done with a concept like difficulty, where the Soulsborne games have a very specific difficulty gradient in order to paint a very specific vision of what their games are meant to be. But a knock-on effect of allowing every single tool in a developer's toolbox to be usable in creating new, diverse, and interesting experiences in games means that some people simply won't enjoy or won't be able to gel with certain ideas that come out. And difficulty, especially high difficulty games like Sekiro and Dark Souls and Bloodborne, that's certainly going to be one of the sticking points for people. But I honestly believe that these games are valid to exist in their current form, and if Miyazaki doesn't think they need an easy mode, if he wants the community to be unified by one difficulty and one experience, I don't think we really should demand that he change that vision. I mean, it's fine to criticize this kind of stuff. Saying that a game is too hard and that this makes the game less enjoyable is very different from saying this game needs to have an easy mode. One is to criticize an artist's intent, and the other is to demand that the artist changes his intent. To sum up a little bit, there's this wonderful talk from GDC 2017. It's actually available on YouTube, and I recommend everybody who's interested in game design check it out, by a man named Justin Fisher. The talk is called Why Dark Souls is the IKEA of Video Games. In this talk, Justin compares IKEA's business model to Dark Souls' design methodology, and finds that they have quite a few similarities. Both Dark Souls and IKEA are targeting a very specific niche, and by targeting these niches, both are capable of optimizing the experience for that niche. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I highly recommend checking out the rest of the talk. It's extremely interesting. I will put a link to it down in the description of this video. One of the knock-on effects of targeting a niche is that people outside of that niche might have a harder time getting into your game, but people inside that niche are going to have a much, much better experience for it. And I think at the end of the day, that's okay. So, no, I don't believe that Sekiro, Dark Souls, or the Soulsborne games need an easy mode. In the same way that I don't believe that games like Celeste need to be in 3D with HD textures, or games like Doki Doki Literature Club need voice acting. There's a difference in what these people are trying to accomplish, and we should respect that. We should let them do that, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We just don't play it. That's what having a choice means. So let developers make the games they want to make. Let directors with vision construct their vision the way they want that vision to function, and don't demand that they change it to suit you. Instead, focus on maybe trying to embrace those visions in a new way. Or if that one isn't for you, maybe skip it entirely. There's a lot out there. A lot of artistic ideas, a lot of different interpretations are present in the world these days. To say that we have a lot of options in gaming is kind of a bit of an understatement. So, yeah, let's just let developers make the kind of games that they want to make. I have been Matt, the Orange Hatter. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I would really appreciate if you liked, subscribed if you're not already a member, or join the conversation. Toss a comment down in the section or join our official Discord, which is linked in the description. Again, thank you very much for watching this video. I can thank you as many times as I want. I'm Canadian. That's part of our laws. I hope you enjoy it, and you all go out there and have a great one. I really hope you all appreciate how much I put on display how terrible I actually am at Sekiro, by the way.